Chapter 30. Forgive yourself the blindness that let others betray you. Sometimes a good heart doesn't see the bad. Unknown. This guilty shit was totally to do with me. If it wasn't, they might have come over and asked if they could borrow jumper leads or something. Even if it was sus, getting me out of the van to help them would have been the smart thing to do. The comical shadowy display I'd just seen really told me that there were no smarts among any of them. I closed the sliding door and stayed in bed for a bit, contemplating my next move. Their battery was flat, so that foiled their attempt. But maybe they were working with others who'd come later. I dressed, grabbed my machete and walked around the van to sit in the driver's seat. A minute later I saw Rangi in the front yard watching me. He could have remained in shadows because he's dark-skinned. Because he never stopped smoking, his lit cigarette being dragged on gave him away. I stared back at him. Again, he could have come out to ask if I was okay. If anyone could get away with disguising his involvement using charm, it was Rangi. I suppose he'd seen the machete I carried with me to the cabin and that made him nervous. From the cabin I could see twitches in the blinds on the windows of the daughter's bedroom. And then I saw Nayo's blinds move. That was all I needed to know, that she was in on it too. Nayo would have been the mastermind behind it. She'd been short with me a few times while I stayed there. Like Billy, the effort required to be nice to me eventually slipped. They're all bad actors and it shows. And because Nayo was always broke, I wouldn't put it past her. Another tell was that she got a call back while I was there from the first homeowners grant people. She told me this to my face. She could have hidden it. There was no way she could afford a deposit, let alone a mortgage. Selling me out is one way. I'm glad Nayo thinks she's a Christian, because she probably believes in hell. Another Judas. If anything is going to get you into hell, it's selling out your friend. I was smart to realise there was nowhere for me to go until daylight. This was going to be another night of vigilance, like the Loy. This was a bit more comfy though, as I could lay my head down on my fridge and catch a few Z's. Farty cars roared up and down a few times, but they didn't stop. At one stage, about 3 or 4 a.m, a farty car stopped beside me and fully opened its bowels. I was asleep and this made me sit bolt upright. I wasn't even scared, just angry as I said out loud, "So obvious. Why are you clowns so obvious?" I wondered if this was the car thieves and they were angry that I thwarted their plans. Well, the 3 moron skateers had, by leaving the headlights on. I knew I was safe despite this shit. Sitting there thinking and smoking, I guessed at their plan. The car thieves could definitely steal my van, but while it was moving, I'd jump out the back for sure. The moron skateers would follow in that fuckwit truck and pick me up, seeming like they're saving me. They would then deliver me to the Crims in a separate package to the van. Maybe gunpoint would be involved. They are non-stop morons in the fact that they didn't factor in that guns don't scare me. I knew no one wanted me dead, so I could just run and they wouldn't shoot. I guess the car thieves were bright enough to know this, as they could have been strapped and carjacked me while I sat in the cabin, but they didn't. All the tells. The daughter looked pissed off that day that I was walking around because I was out in the open and could be identified by any shop CCTV. This is not a good thing, as it's checked in missing persons cases. Though I didn't like paying on credit card because of the Superdorks tracking, it did give a good paper trail for my missing persons status. At 5 a.m. I drove off to find a place to camp in the main street under CCTV. I found a park outside a Uniting Church, old school religion that wasn't run by greedy a-holes. There were trucks backing into the church to do some kind of delivery or distro, so I felt safe. I slept so hard till about 9 a.m. I was a real mess after this. Adrian's Judas move hadn't worried me that much, as he's quite mentally unstable and not a supportive friend as a result, and I'd merely found out the easy way that he wasn't a true friend. The problem was I'd flipped a coin over whether Nayo was involved. It came back no. I know that shows that the coin is a very bad way of making decisions. I make excuses and pretend that I needed to trust Nayo in order to find out that they were all in on it. If the coin had come back no, I would have made plans to leg it, probably told them, and then been on the run in the middle of nowhere with them still coming after me. I imagine the scene back at the house. They'd all be nervous that they'd been made by their own stupid mistakes. Naya would be pissed, something I'd never seen her be, having missed out on the bounty. She'd be up those kids like there was no tomorrow. I got worried that she'd try to ring me and pretend everything was okay. So I blocked her number. I was so worried about running into her again. She'd be extremely charming, and though I wouldn't fall for it, it'd be hard to be accusatory towards her. I just drove. I did have a destination in mind. I'd go back to Bellsville, as that little van park was pretty chill. I hoped no one would be there that was sus. I needed to find somewhere to be anyway. Riskily, my full plan was as follows. Go up to Queensland to take my van out of my company rego and back into my name. I'd been planning on folding down the company anyway, and selling the van would be part of it. I'd then hang around till February when my unit in Beachtown would become vacant. I was just going to live in my van. I had a loose plan of putting the van in storage with a fella I'd stored it with before when I lived in Beachtown. I'd get my motorcycle out and just camp around in hotels and van parks. It was a change of vehicle that might hold them off for a while. Plus, people don't like to mess with motorcycle riders. We could be in with real bikies. I had no plans to go home to my folks for safety. I had a brother in New South Wales too, up near the border. I could have gone there and lain low. I didn't know if I'd be welcome though, since we'd had quite a fractious relationship. My pride didn't let me do that. I would do all of this myself. I wasn't going to tell anyone else. On the way there, I stopped at a really quaint coffee shop in an old wooden heritage building. The woman in that shop called me darling. It was music to my persecuted ears. I was exhausted and it was hard to down the bacon and egg burger, but it was a relief to have a comforting face that held no ulterior motive. As I drove into Bellsville, the first person I saw walking along the street was the bald-headed backpacker from the last time I was there. He was wearing high-vis and walking along with other backpackers. So he just worked in Bellsville. He wasn't tailing me. I headed to a laundromat to get some washing done. The women working there were, as expected, friendly without ulterior motive. There was a boomer male working with them also. I didn't like his vibe, but that's not to say he was sus. He was probably sus for reasons not related to me. Most males are guilty till their vibes prove them innocent with me. I sat in my van and noticed a revolting, blubbery incel male in his 40s. I could tell he was incel because he wore a sexy manga schoolgirl shirt. His hard drive would be next level gross. He stood across the road looking at his phone and looking at the Chinese restaurant behind me next to the laundromat. I couldn't get over how pervert looking he was. He continued to stand there, phone in hand, until he made moves to cross the road and go into the restaurant. He never once looked at me. Maybe my location wasn't that accurate. Maybe he knew not to make it obvious. As he passed by my van, I held up my tablet pretending to film him. I've got you on vid, freak. I paid for a whole week in the van park. I know that was hopeful, but I had to waste time in safe places. I really hoped this place wouldn't turn on me. On finding a good spot in the van park, I went to the communal kitchen. Another French backpacker was in there. I started up a chat with him. He had dried saliva all around his mouth, like he was on head meds. I ignored this and tried to be as friendly as possible to him. He said he was hot living in his rooftop tent and car. I found the aircon remote and said that he could turn this on to cool down. He acted a bit impatient, like he already knew this and didn't appreciate me telling him again. This was strange. Just regard me as a friendly stranger, mate, and thank me. I set my marquee up and got a lot of stuff out of my van that I planned on getting rid of to make it more roomy in there. I decided to shed all my stock and electrical appliances that I was planning on using if I got myself a pad to live in. Another crazy plan I'd come up with was to not connect the electricity in my Beachtown apartment. I had auxiliary batteries and a solar panel. I'd buy another spare bat and more solar panels and live off-grid. That way I'd only have to fill up my gas bottle and pay for water. I'd hand wash or feet wash my clothes in the shower runoff and live like I did in the mountains. This had saved me money. There was a common area downstairs that I could use to charge my lappy and battery packs I use for my phone and tablet. I was quite looking forward to the challenge of living off-grid, right in the middle of the city. An Aussie boomer tradie with Vic plates pulled into the cabin behind me. Later on, he had a male visitor. I heard them both laughing in that way that males laugh at dirty jokes. I knew they were both sharing and watching the IBA vids. Sick, basic pervs. Damn, my safety had been compromised. The bald-headed backpacker was a tech bro. He was in the kitchen with a laptop. He also had a very expensive central locking system on his Mitsubishi van. Probably cost the amount his whole shit-heap van was worth. It worked out that he probably hacked me the first time I stayed there because I foolishly tuned into the van park Wi-Fi. I'll never do that again. He and the Frenchie were mates, so French guy was untrustworthy, hence why he didn't treat me normally. Just another incel, angry that a woman tried to tell him something he already knew. A normal boomery couple set up a trailer tent right near me. They were friendly and not sus. I had to concentrate on the fact that people weren't all sus. Find the friendlies, they'll keep you grounded. And shit, did I need it. That night as I lay in bed, lots of farty cars and motorcycles with loud pipes seemed to arrive in town. In the early evening, I even heard a Harley arrive in the park. Fucking hell, this was too close to home. I couldn't see them, but I immediately assumed bike gang member. If there was a bounty, of course they would want the biggest bite of the cherry, being the largest organised crime outfits in the country. I was terrified. I prayed and sent the telepathic message that if anyone strapped came to kidnap me from this van park, I'd risk a bullet and use a machete. I didn't care anymore. No one came that Friday night. Saturday night was worse for car noises though. Small farty cars, V8 bogan cars, baffleless dirt bikes and Harleys. It was positively deafening. I thought I heard a police chopper overhead at one point. This gave me confidence to go out to the toilet as I'd been hiding in my van. As I walked across the grass, I saw the backpackers watching me. I held my fist up in victory. The cars went silent for a while. It started up again. They were dragging in the streets nearby. It was so loud and I knew they were all there because of me. Sure, it was a Saturday night, but this was positively illegal. No cop sirens to be heard. I even heard two incel bogan males walking near the back fence talking. One said, "Come on, let's go get a fuck." This out-of-control subhuman couldn't control himself. His friend must have controlled him because they didn't come into the park. I should have stood near the fence with a machete and just stared at them like Damien from The Omen. Little pussios would have called the cops. Again, my position had been compromised. The super dorks must have been angry that I'd escaped Nio and her whole criminal family. This exchange between Grommets told me that they all knew I wasn't a consensual participant in this shit. Good, but also extremely not good. They all knew that they could get away with raping me. I was outside of the protection of the law, but somehow they were all still scared of the law. It didn't make sense. I went out Sunday morning to buy a steering lock at the Supercheap quite near me. A steering lock would prevent anyone who had a remote key code. I pulled the lock out of its plastic and walked around the streets with the lock over my shoulder. I guess I looked like a mad, violent woman. It wasn't wise, but I didn't care. People eyed me suspiciously. Nevertheless, I wanted to send a message. When I got back, the male out of the nice couple said they were going out for the day and asked me to watch their stuff, which I said I would. During this convo, I'd asked the guy if he heard the cars last night. He said he hadn't, but he was a pretty heavy sleeper. He'd started the convo by apologising about his video projector last night if it was too noisy. I assured him it wasn't. I had cursed out loud when a couple behind me staying in a cabin had driven in and not turned their lights off, full beaming into my marquee while I sat there. I'd sworn because I was on edge. He must have heard and thought it was about him. He was nearly as paranoid as me. He went back to his wife and said something about, "We're all right," as though he was worried that they'd angered me. Who did these people think I was? Clearly someone not good. Probably more misinfo that they were consuming that justified people's involvement in the human Pokemon game. There had to be something like that these dolts believed. Otherwise it was too cruel, even for fast book tragics. The Vic Plate sleaze sat out the back of his work ute all day. He barbecued, drank beer, but didn't sit there on his phone. He just sat staring straight ahead. Sometimes I caught him staring through a gap in my marquee, right at me, not hiding it. I was fucking furious. I got paranoid that he was watching so that he could lie to the couple later that I flogged something of theirs. This would get me in trouble with the van park people and get me kicked out at the least, or invite the cops at the worst. So I decided to talk to him and say he was doing a good job keeping an eye on their stuff. I also mentioned the noise last night and he said he hadn't heard anything. He was a heavy sleeper. They all seemed to be in on it. I realised that no one was saying anything because I was good for business for this town. They all conspired together to put up with hoons as long as they could make money off my location. This was yet more proof that the wider Joe public were playing this game, not just young'uns like Adrian and his flatmates. I guess I always knew, but I just thought it was incels, deadbeat divorced dads, and various other distasteful males who wanted me to feel hunted and persecuted. Males who were waiting on some crazy gangsters to kidnap me. And then they'd happy is a stretch, these excuses for humans don't feel happiness, and maliciously watch as I was raped and tortured to death. These are women's sons, daughters' fathers, males who hold positions of responsibility in society. I had already lost my whole faith in mankind, but now, with this human Pokemon game, I lost faith in humankind. I was so paranoid when the couple came back. I thought they were going to get me kicked out, so I waited quietly in my marquee. It was so hot. This was torture. The Vic sleaze continued watching me. I eventually showered and went to bed. Another night of loud engines that seemed to stop at 11 p.m, the hour that noise disturbance had to end. I got woken at 4 a.m. by a very loud, baffleless dirt bike. It sounded like a 400cc. I also noticed the day before that a straight-looking guy came into a cabin behind me. I was watching him and he seemed to hide behind the door, waiting for me to stop watching before he made the dash into the cabin. Really sus. The next morning he came out dressed in a school staff member's shirt. This guy was a school teacher. He again hid behind the screen door to the cabin before he made his dash out to the Mercedes-Benz he drove. I was sitting on the front bumper of the van with my head in my hands. I packed up my marquee because I was going to go to the dump at second-hand shops that morning to get rid of things. He eventually sat in his Merc, watching me. I looked despairing and I got the feeling that he felt sorry for me, even though he'd cashed in on his location near me for the night. I walked into town and bought a drug test. The reason for this is that I'd found a sticky white substance in the bottom of my aluminium Kakadu water bottle. I'd cleaned it out, but something told me that the Dingleford fuckheads may have dosed me and the residue was still there. The test came back negative on all the substances and I breathed a sigh of relief. I went to the op shop and the woman there was just so normal and welcoming to me and appreciative of my donation. The boomer males out the back weren't as nice and I was angry that I was giving them all my business stock and electricals. So much jewellery, biker patches, brand new biker brand t-shirts. I had to remember that I'd never do a stall again. It wasn't safe. And I was relieved that I hadn't given them to Nio like I'd planned. Those fuckers got on the phone as I drove out from the back of the store. This worried me, but it was too late. I drove to the nice little town near Maltford, wanting to visit the cafe again. It was closed. I saw some bins and decided I'd get rid of my branded stock in these bins. I figured since the dork had compromised my Fastbook business page, my brand name would be synonymous with me being a hunted person. People could probably get a lot of money for the stock, money that I'd never see. So I dumped it in a bin with my wet clothes that I was washing in my bucket. That would stop people going through the bin with that on top. Parked up on the street nearby was a council truck. Again, the fuckhead in it was watching me. As I drove off, he came down and unlocked a bin over the road from the one I dumped in. He was going to find the stuff. This was the first time I realised that even my thoughts are being tracked. They'd pass the info on to whoever could help them with their fucked up plans. I couldn't think of any other reason why they'd want my stuff. I decided to drive north to Bimford. On the way, I stopped at a small town and used the public loos. A big fancy van driven by a solo dude had caught my eye coming in the opposite direction. Suddenly, he was also parked up on the opposite side of the road. The prick had doubled back and found me. I went and sat in my van. In that time, a carpet-laying business van pulled up behind me and the guy used the loo. He drove off unsuspiciously. I got out and stood in front of the loo and fully eyed the other van, letting him know that I knew he was tracking me. Suddenly, a highway patrol car came around, turned into a spot in front of the loo, fully parking me in. I quickly walked to my van and sat in the cabin with the door open. I was expecting the cop to come talk to me. He left the engine running. He didn't approach me but spent a bit of time behind my van. For sure, he would have tracked me and cashed in. He left. I did too, and as I took the right turn on the T intersection at the end of the road, the carpet fuckhead sat there on the left in his van. He looked at me and put his index finger to his nose. I immediately realised he had called the cop, and the cop was corrupt, probably his brother-in-law or some shit. They'd both be divorced dads with a problem with me because I was a feminist. Just sad blokes who were mates. The cop was definitely out of line doing this, or otherwise he would have approached me and told me not to loiter or some shit. He knew I wasn't doing anything wrong. But he sure was, breaching my privacy, harassment, and preventing me from leaving. So, entrapment. This was just so bad that I started laughing out loud. I think this was the first time I realised that I could be in another dimension. Whatever explanation could there be? The whole world had gone mad. How could this be? Further up the road, I got out at another truck pullover area. I needed to flip the coin and ask, so are all cops corrupt in this dimension? The answer came back, no. I'd just been unlucky to deal with one of them. As I went to open my side door, it jammed. A thick book, ironically Simone de Beauvoir's Second Sex, had jammed into the door mechanism. I couldn't believe my bad luck. I couldn't budge it, so I had to drive with the door alarm sounding the whole way. I couldn't play music to disguise it because I wasn't opening my phone. I'd never felt so defeated. This was horrible. I stopped at Wellington and couldn't fix it there either. Somewhere along the way, I noticed that the door opened itself a bit. It was very lucky that nothing had flown out because I'd left my army bag with phone, wallet and everything on my mattress, too stressed to remember to take it out. I was grateful for a little bit of luck, finally. Bimford was as bad as expected. I saw heaps of Indigenous guys walking into town, looking at their phone, looking around. When their gaze fell on me, they looked back at their phones. I was made, and they were small-town gangers. Fuck, I was nervous about Corys. They didn't have a lot to lose when it came to getting in trouble with the law. I'd be cactus if they got an idea to kidnap me. I went to a shopping centre to buy a Telon SIM. I wanted to try another network and number, see if it made a difference. Some young Koori girls started to follow me around the shopping centre and I heard them on the phone saying, "She's here," and some such about my location. Fuck, even the kids were into it. This also made me laugh out loud, in shock. The Telon shop was a nightmare. All those incel tech bros eyeing me off smugly. Of course they'd be into this. A fucking wet dream for them. I brought my phone into the shop and tried to open the PIN code on it. It didn't open. I didn't remember putting one on when I'd cleared the data. Fucking Rangi, I realised. When he checked it for firmware, he must have put a pin on it. Arsehole. The incel suggested I buy another from them, and I nearly did. Then I declined. I hated waiting while he put my details into the system for the SIM card. As I walked out, I physically shuddered and hissed, "Yuck," out loud as I shook off my proximity to so many of those freaks. A random park, another boomer male waiting there for me, watching me, looking at his phone. The woman who owned the A-van was in the motel across the road. She came out and moved her van. I realised she wasn't on my side. The Bellsville van park rang and asked me if I was coming back. I said I needed a night away because of all the noise. She said she didn't hear the noise, but she was you guessed it, a heavy sleeper. Fuck these gaslighting pricks. I told her I'd be back tomorrow and she even said she'd give me a credit. Of course they wanted me back. I never told them otherwise. Let people arrive and be disappointed. I couldn't even trust grey nomads anymore. Something weird happened next. I found a cemetery to park up near. The car park was big and it could have had a lot of cars pulling up in it. I was the only one. I even went and walked around the cemetery, loving the peace. Absolutely no one came into the car park. There were big signs about CCTV, so I figured that might have been it. It's amazing how good I felt knowing that I was off the radar here. It was definitely a physical sensation. It was relief. I tried to sleep a bit, but it was too hot. A pair of Koori fellas walked past while I was sitting with my side door open. They looked in at me and one said to the other, "She's a hard-living woman." I felt complimented. I sure was, and it was cool to get the validation. I was working on anything positive right now and also relieved that they weren't on their phones, checking the location or telling heavy people where I was. For some reason, I believed that the school teacher from this morning had posted on whatever sick site they were all gathering on that I was dangerous, carried a machete, and to not approach me. He knew I wasn't dangerous. He just felt sorry for me and wanted to buy me some peace. Would there be others like this? I hope so. I got my phone out, put a rock underneath it, and drove over it. It was compromised and useless to me now without the PIN code to open it. And if Rangi would have definitely found malware on it and didn't tell me. It got very hot and was hard to carry to the bin. I must have busted the lithium battery. There's such a scary, poisonous technology for more reasons than one. I sat in that car park for as long as I could, telling myself that I had to soak up this peace and quiet because I didn't know when I'd get more. My plan was to drive all night to the coast.